Well, we're making a change for the fall here at Conversation Balloons. And instead of every other week, we're going to have a show for you every week. And so we hope that you can keep up with our doubled pace as we double down on wonderful interviews with experts and friends about all kinds of generational things. We're so excited about who we're meeting. And we are also going to offer a few shows where I'm just talking directly to you. We have some neat things to share along those lines too. So we hope you'll enjoy every show that we're going to offer you. And we will reprise a few shows that came out early in our course. We're entering our fourth year. So we will have lots going on this fall, and keep up with us and let us know how we're doing. We really appreciate rates and reviews and subscribes. And so share us with all your friends. This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. It's my pleasure and honor today to have on Dr. Kim Parker. She has a doctorate in education and she's a licensed clinical social worker. And she has an important and moving story to tell about being one of the people who had to flee Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. She has now been living here in the States for many years, but thank you for coming on, Kim.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
There were many people who fled Vietnam, not just arriving in the States, but some went to Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. What were your parents like? What was your family like? And what part of Vietnam did you live in?
I lived in South Vietnam, and I was born in 72, just a couple of years before the fall of Vietnam, when the North Vietnamese soldiers made it to the capital of South Vietnam. And my dad was born and raised in Vietnam to a Vietnamese mother and a Chinese father who actually was kind of absentee, so by a single mom. And he became a businessman, and he met my mother in business. They had a little store, I believe, selling or manufacturing hair clips, and so it was a young, booming economy, from what my dad described back in the 60s and 70s in Vietnam, and it was a democracy where there was freedom, there was capitalism, there was just a flourishing society. But when the uh, the North Vietnamese took over, the communists took over, and they implemented totalitarian rule, top down. Took over the banking system. They took over the education system. They took over censorship of the media, the print, radio, and just everything. And so we moved to the countryside. My parents said we moved to the countryside just to have more freedom and just to plan our escape because of the loss of freedom when the communists took over. I think we were fairly middle class. My dad was a successful businessman. He had a car, he had chauffeur, we had maids and servants for each of the children. But when the communists took over, it was a harder living. Everybody was pretty much equally under the thumb of the bureaucrats.
What age were you at that time?
I was a toddler, around 3, 4 years old, I was told, when we moved to the countryside. And I lived in the countryside with my parents. My parents had five kids, and then they had the sixth one while we were in the country by the sea. That was 1978 when my dad was starting to plan the escape by building a boat, pretending to be a fisherman, learning navigation, and just gathering his friends and family who were willing to take the risk of leaving by sea. So that was October, I believe, 1978 when we left Vietnam. It was my dad and me and four siblings, my older brother and three younger siblings. My mother and baby sister stayed behind because she had just given birth, and so the baby was just not um, old enough to travel by sea. And so they had made plans for my mom and baby sister to go on a later escape with some other relatives. And so my dad had his boat built. It was just looking at my little newspaper. We
Oh,
made the newspaper in Plainview, Texas when we
uh-huh.
first were sponsored. This was 1979. But it says here my dad's boat had 77 persons. And I forget how big his boat was. Maybe it was 30 something feet. We planned our escape by night. He had pretended to be a fisherman with his relatives going back and forth until we did it by night and took off, had to bribe some of the Coast Guards with gold to be able to get out.
Hmm.
uh, and we were, I believe it was 3 nights and 2 days at sea until our boat made it to the shore of Malaysia. It was kind of a traumatic experience for my dad, especially since the captain of the boat that he had hired to sail the seas chickened out, took the money, chickened out, and just didn't show. So he ended up having to navigate. Yeah, my dad was a hero.
Oh.
And I was probably about 6 years old at that time.
How did they prepare you for this? Did they tell you what was going on, or at such a young age were they afraid you might spill the beans, or how do you do that when you have to move children?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember that at all. That we had a conversation about that or what to expect. I only remember the boat ride. It was storming, it was rocky, and my brother said I had thrown up on his lap. um, my mother was not there, so my dad had a family friend who was an older woman, and she was kind of like our nanny, took care of us while we were on the boat and on the island in refugee camp in Malaysia.
Were the children crying?
I
What do
don't
you
remember
remember?
the emotions. It was kind of like survival of the fittest. And he nearly lost my baby brother, Tim, 1.5 years old. So he was a baby on the island and he had developed some kind of illness where he almost nearly died uh, at camp. We were at refugee camp. I believe it was set up by the UN in Malaysia, and they had workers there. I remember we had rationed food in Ziploc bags, like rice and soup and things like that.
Mhm.
There was English education classes at the camp. I remember the kids got to play with old Coke cans, Coca-Cola, where there were those tin lids, that you could push in. I don't know. We were just playing with that at the camp. My dad got to go to English classes to learn English. And there were social workers, I believe, on the camp.
Did your parents have a religious affiliation back in Vietnam?
They were culturally Buddhists. My dad was more an agnostic. He didn't like anybody who was religious because he thought that maybe they were just in it for the money and just in it to serve themselves, but he didn't quite trust that they were good. And plus, there were Buddhists who were campaigning against the war, which did not help the South to win against communism to defend their country. And so he didn't appreciate that. He didn't appreciate all the anti war sentiments because he wanted us to be able to defend our homeland and, be able to live in freedom. And of
Mhm.
course, ultimately, all the anti war protests back in the United States and affected America and all the allies' help of South Vietnam. And so the communist was able to take over. And my mom was a little bit more religious and, sometimes would go to the Buddhist temple while I was growing up in Southern California. My dad didn't so much. Although on the boat ride, when it was storming, there was praying to the ancestors. So I think the Buddhists believe that ancestors are up there watching over us. And so praying for blessings and protections from the ancestors. And so they were lighting incense sticks and praying for our survival, our protection.
Mm. Well, so you made it to the refugee camp, the UN camp, and how long were you all there?
We were there for 11 months.
And what was that like? Were there lots of people? Were there lots of other children?
There were other children. I don't remember if there were lots of them. I think looking back at pictures that there were a lot of refugees, maybe in the thousands. It started making its waves. 1978, I believe, was one of the first wave of refugees, and then later, when they were successfully repatriated to other countries, more refugees came in 1979, 1980, and in the early 80s. More made the trip out to leave, to escape, and to find a better future.
Hmm. And so during those 11 months, do you remember if you had any schooling?
I don't remember, but I believe that there was some schooling, there was some English classes, but not like like a kindergarten class or anything. I
Uh-huh.
remember that.
And so you were sponsored, I believe you said, by a Lutheran organization to come to the States. Is that right?
Yes, it was Lutheran Refugee and Social Services. Um, from what I was told, there were images of boat people on the news in America, and so the Refugee and Immigration Services looked for families to sponsor these refugees. And my future father-in-law was the pastor of a Lutheran church in Plainview, Texas. He worked with his congregation to uh, agree to sponsor a family, and of course, they wanted like two parents with two kids, kind of thing. And the social worker from the Immigration and Refugee Services told them about this father with five young kids. You gotta help them get out. So they agreed to sponsor this father with five little kids that were 7 and under. And so that's how we got to come to America. We were flown first class
Oh,
on a plane ride. And I don't remember that plane ride that much, but I do remember that we had shrimp. That was a so first time I've flown first class, and probably I have not since, but it was nice. Of course, my dad was footed with the bill later after he was able to have a job and work and all that. But my dad said his friend was sponsored by a Baptist church in that similar area. I believe it was Lubbock or Plainview, and that he didn't have to pay back his plane ticket. And he was given more uh, support financially. But we were just,
Well, that's sweet. When did your mom and the rest of the family get to come?
they got to come in January of 1990. We came in September of 1979, just in time for me to start first grade. And my older brother started second grade. My younger brother started kindergarten. And then my other siblings were in daycare. My father in law and my father worked together to, and my father in law worked with some senators to talk about my mother and that she was in a camp in Thailand. So she came later, and her boat ride was 10 days, and they were robbed 3 times by different pirates, and they'd taken everything. And the last pirates, or they took the motor, so they were just drifting until a Thai Navy ship saw them and decided to pull them in to shore. And so she was in refugee camp there in Thailand with my baby sister for 6 months, and she made herself busy knitting and making sweaters for us while she was in camp. And the they were able to be sponsored in January of 1980. So my baby sister, was 1.5 years old by then.
Hmm.
So we were reunited in the airport in Lubbock, Texas. And yeah,
What was that like? Do you remember seeing your mom for the first time after all that?
I don't remember. However, they did take a picture of us. At first, my father in law said that I was shy and none of the kids went to hug their mom or anything. And then I was the first to go. But my father in law also said that my dad wasn't very much like giving a nice, warm, affectionate welcome embrace, because it's not his it's not his culture. It's not Vietnamese culture to show that kind of expression or affection in public.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's just my parents. They don't even kiss. so, uh, so yeah, it was like, did we pick up the wrong woman? It was all inside, of course.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And so you entered first grade knowing how much English?
I don't believe I knew any English. However, I became a translator for my dad and my future in-laws, the sponsor family. Um, because I started picking up English in school. They had this program called ESL, English as a Second Language. So I remember learning through these little slides.
Do you think, Kim, that you your interest in social work may have come from being helped by people in that role when you were so much in need?
Oh, for sure. We were helped by social workers on camp. We were helped by social workers when we came here. My parents had moved to California a year after living in Texas. Culturally, that little small town area just wasn't diverse enough and wasn't cultural, and the weather wasn't the best. And so they moved to Southern California, where there were a lot of immigrant population that had relatives and friends there. And and then also we were dependent on government assistance when we moved to California. And so we had social workers visiting. and talking to each of the to the family, to the kids, just checking on our housing, on our health care, and everything. And so I was always translating, or I was always speaking for my parents, talking with the social workers.
Hmm. Well, I imagine those who had a human touch and had warmth toward you really made an impression.
Yeah, it was more, I believe my dad was grateful. My parents were grateful to be able to have assistance, but just to live in freedom, uh, just to share as equal citizens under the law. We became citizens after the 5 years of legal residency. So the church that sponsored us also helped apply for our green cards and did all that legal paperwork for us to come over. And so we had our green cards for 5 years, and my dad wanted to become a citizen right away, and so that was the requirement, was you had to have at least 5 years. Then you have to pass the test, so he had to learn all about Betsy Ross and the states and the three branches of government. And so I was the one that was quizzing and teaching them or reading them. So I learned civics and government and all the laws and our history way back before I was in eighth grade. When I was in eighth grade was when they passed the citizenship test.
What do you think of the phenomenon of all the illegal immigration that we've experienced the last few years?
Yeah, we have to me, in order to appreciate this country and to be on equal standing with other citizens, native born or naturalized citizens, we have to have paperwork. We have to be here legally. And we have to appreciate the law and order that is present here. Of course, there's going to be corruption anywhere. However, when you come in illegally, you have a little bit of an entitlement attitude. America lets in millions of immigrants every year legally. Legally, we go through, we process all of that, we do the vetting. We were vetted when we were in camp. We had to do all the paperwork, we had to pass the health screening, we had to, all of that. We had to have a sponsor that was going to help us to get resettled, successfully. And so all of that is really important. Even though we did become dependent on government assistance, um, there's still a reason why there's a process to do things legally so that you have a chance to become a citizen. When you come in illegally, it's hard to become a citizen because you've already broken the law. It's really unfair to the citizens here, and it's really unfair to the new immigrants who are here not as equal human beings, not as equals, but just as illegals. And it's just not fair to them. They are very vulnerable to exploitation by human traffickers, child labor traffickers, sex traffickers, businesses that take advantage of them by underpaying them because they don't have the paperwork. So it's just a bad situation for everyone.
Yeah, I read that. I read that they are often afraid of law enforcement and afraid when they are victims of crimes or need help. They're afraid to call the authorities because they've been living in the shadows, so they are vulnerable to the worst of the people that are in the United States.
And so I do appreciate this administration doing the hard thing by securing the border and enforcing immigration laws. And we're not closing the borders to any needy folks. We are just doing it by due process. There are people who are applying that have been on waiting lists for years and years. And then so to come illegally is hard for everyone. It's hard for the folks who are trying to do things lawfully. And of course, we said that it's hard for the folks who are desperate that are here illegally, because again, they're vulnerable, they're subject to marginalization, exploitation, and criminality. They don't get the protection of the law, and so it's just not a good thing to turn a blind eye on and just to persist like this. We need to do something about this.
Hmm. Well, you went on and became a citizen, and you found a career, and you got your certificate to be a social worker, and you have founded an organization, a professional organization yourself. Tell us about that.
Yes. Even prior to going to college, I had I guess, an American mother. She was an English teacher who lived down the street from me, and I would spend many hours after school talking with her and jabbering away. And she would tell me, Kim, you are 15 going on 25. Because I was just always thinking of these things that, adults would think of and have to um, address. And she says, you should go into liberal arts when you get to college. Liberal arts, you're into the liberal arts. Well, social work is a great combination of a little bit of the science of helping and then some liberal arts, about people, about human history, human nature, all of that. I ended up going into getting a master's in social work after a year working in the Bay Area, and that was probably God leading me to that profession, bringing me back to my calling of wanting to help. And so
Mm.
I also became a Christian in college my sophomore year because it was just so hard to do it all on my own. So I just gave up and just believed like a blindly like a child. And my parents said, "Oh, Christianity is just teaching people to be good. The Christian church sponsored us. They're doing good. Want to be blessed by God." But they were kind of, weren't really religious, other than, any religion's okay. We want to be good. But because I became a Christian in college, everything was under God's guidance. And so it was me prayerfully asking God to lead me. And so that helped me through social work and through all the trials of single adulthood. And then I moved to Texas. I got married a year after I moved here, and I was looking for a professional organization that supports both my Christian values as well as my social work values of wanting to help others who were in need. I had become a therapist in 2003. So I came here, got my license LMSW. I got my master's in California. And as I was working in a homeless shelter here in Texas, and then I worked in a foster care adoption agency. And at that time, all the news was talking about all these political activism. It was whites fighting white supremacy. It was, gay rights, and it was all of these abortion rights, women's, all these things. And to me, I came into the helping profession to help people who were in need, who were struggling, whether that was from poverty or whether that was from mental health. And so with all of these political activists going against some of my Christian faith and beliefs, I decided to look for a Christian organization that would support Christian social workers. And I thought I found one. I went to its first conference in 2013, and I did meet some wonderful Christian social workers in that group. But there was a workshop called Honoring a Woman's Reproductive Rights or something. And so when I went to that workshop, I was kind of surprised that there was no scripture shared, there was no biblical worldview shared. It was kind of a humanistic view of how to help a woman, her needs. She was struggling feeling wise. Maybe her um, boyfriend left her, and so she's pregnant, and she's struggling. And so that was their rationale for supporting reproductive rights, which is really abortion rights. And so I didn't see any Bible verses, any kind of integration of Christian faith. And so several of us got together and talked about it. That wasn't the only workshop. There were some other sessions that were just very much about fighting the system and fighting all these things. And coming to America, not being white, of course, there was some incidences where maybe we weren't fully accepted, but that was more maybe my dad's experience of maybe people looking down on him because he was poor or he was not Caucasian or he didn't have the standing, the education. It was more of a class issue from what he described to me, because the people who helped us were Caucasians. It was like all types. Our first landlords in California were Black Americans, that we rented from. And so we didn't really have the whole fighting racism and fighting white supremacy mindset. My parents just thought that, we were just very grateful to live in America where we were free and we were free to compete and the kids were gonna get educated. The Democrat talking points at that time was just to my dad, it really reminded him of communism, and it was just all propaganda. It's not real. He would say you got to look at what they do, not what they say. Their talk is very sweet and you just want to get on board with them and support their cause. But if you look at what they do after they took over, it was high taxes for everybody. The government rulers were the ones that were living high on the hog while the rest of the country was starving because they were trying to impose high taxation, no incentive to work hard and to climb up the wealth ladder. And so when all those talking points were coming around in 2000, even as a social worker, I was looking for a Christian organization. And so even after that first conference, I regrouped and, made friends with some other Christian social workers and who, love America and weren't hateful of people who weren't white. um, and, yeah, the people who were white, because it was just so much of this white supremacy thing going on with social workers. White supremacists were the bad guys, the oppressors, and all that. And so I was able to form a support group for us online in 2017 with maybe 9 social workers. And I started a group and it has since grown. And then we became a nonprofit organization in 2020, thanks to the help of Dr. Michael Schur. He is the co-founder, and he was one of the original 9 that I gathered together online to support each other with our Christian faith. And so we became an interdisciplinary organization, ACHHS, Association of Christians in Health and Human Services. And we were able to get some other Christian universities on board who were also, all the Christian universities are battling the ideologies of how do we help, if especially Christian faith, teaching us that our identity is as children of God. We were created by God. And so because of our Christian faith, sometimes there's a lot of hostility against Christians in higher education because there's this trend, postmodern ideology, that all of that is backwards, all of that is oppressive, all of that is just too fundamentalist to believe, and they don't believe in the creation of man, male and female. God made us. They don't believe in marriage being as one in Christ and for procreation. And so I know one of the good things here in America is we do have freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, but freedom of religion, where we can practice whatever faith we believe in. And so as Christians, we wanted to be able to practice. As Christian social workers, we're not trying to impose our values on others. We're not imposing them on our clients. We're not discriminating against the clients. But to be told that these beliefs are unethical, or that, oh, you're going to not be able to work with your clients then just because you have these beliefs, is very marginalizing of us. It is vilifying of us to automatically put us in the oppressor category. And it's very discriminatory. We want to help in the various professions, um, without having to give up our conscience rights, our religious beliefs.
Yeah, I can see why you discovered this bifurcation, that it's hard to straddle both ideologies and be a professional in that other world. I believe you have a case that you're following. I certainly am. Childs versus Salazar, arising out of Colorado, that the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments on this fall. And in that case, a counselor was doing what is called conversion therapy. So usually this is a derogatory term, but she was counseling young people who had unwanted sexual identity issues and helping them find a comfort level with their birth sex. And that has been banned in Colorado. And she's seeking relief and the freedom. Her argument is freedom of speech. And Colorado's argument is we're just regulating a profession, and states can do that, and that's going to be something that needs to be decided. So, do you have any comments on that case?
Yes, one of our board members has helped write an amicus brief to file with that, because that affects so many of our members. We are Christians, and we don't believe in postmodern ideology that are not based on science. Yes, there are people who struggle with same-sex attraction. There are people who struggle with gender identity and feel that they might be born in the wrong body, or might be want to be of the opposite sex. And those are people we do have compassion for, and we do want to help. And we do address ethically client self-determination, just walking gently with them, and maybe helping to explore any kind of history of trauma, of dysfunctions in childhood and family relationships, because all of those things affect human development.
Sure.
So with this conversion therapy law, it's implying that therapists are converting our clients, and we don't convert. Therapy is not about converting. Therapy is coming alongside to help someone, to help them with self-awareness, to help them with self-esteem, self-confidence, identify their goals, to help them understand, explore their triggers, their obstacles, to help them make sense of what has happened in their life and their tendencies, their behaviors, where it comes from, all of that. And so it's client driven. And there, I do not know of any therapist, Christian or not, even conservative or not, that are practicing conversion therapy. Now, maybe that term came along because there were paraprofessionals, folks who are in the ministry of helping with same-sex attraction. I believe there was a group called Exodus, and I don't believe all of them were licensed. Most of them were not. That's why we call paraprofessionals, the folks that are just doing some kind of ministry out of what they felt called to do. And as human beings, we all make mistakes. There are plenty of parents who make mistakes and shut kids up without realizing it, and then they have to cope in maladaptive ways. And all of that. And so maybe there were errors in how this ministry and how the folks that were helping in that area may have done that, but they were not licensed therapists. They're not professionals that need to be taught that you honor a client's wishes, you honor a client's thoughts, you listen, you validate, you help explore, you walk alongside them, you don't shame them. And maybe there were some Christians that were trying to shame, you're going to hell if you don't do this or that or whatever. And so maybe that can be very traumatizing. We're not in support of that kind. We don't even call that therapy. And so the whole conversion therapy word is just terminology. It's just a misnomer. But it does seek to silence Christian therapists who are working very well with their clients, who are helping so many clients, not just the Christian ones, but also the non-Christian ones. I've had plenty of non-Christian clients. I've helped Muslims, I've helped atheists, I've helped agnostics, Buddhists. We can relate on a human level, and our code of ethics, our professional ethics teach us how to come alongside someone to help, to develop a therapeutic alliance with them and to help them meet their goals from point A to point B. And so this whole thing, how you cannot help a client if they are gay, lesbian, trans, bisexual, queer, however they identify, and you can't help them if they want to be helped out of that. If they want, because they're struggling, they don't like that they have these struggles, whether it's the sexual orientation or whether it's the gender identity struggles, they should be able to be helped. And the laws say, no, you just got to affirm them. You can't even touch it if you're not going to affirm them, because then you'd be unethical. So then these clients are left to fend for themselves, to struggle internally. And I know some folks like that who were struggling, that wanted help. And if these conversion therapy laws were passed in all the states, it would destroy so many struggling young people. It tells them that, and we've had so many detransitioners come out in this past 5 years, share their stories of how they were just affirmed and got all this treatment that was supposedly affirming, and it didn't solve any of their issues. It didn't reduce their depression. It didn't reduce their anxiety, their trauma. And they came out of it, and now they're upset that nobody actually helped them, listened to them, and walked alongside them to explore some of this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through such invasive, affirming treatment and affirming care.
And sometimes irreversible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what goes on in a counseling session can be heard differently than it's said, and it really creates a liability awareness that, the patient, the client can mischaracterize what was intended, and you can have a lot of, misunderstanding and litigation arise just from you can't just not say these things under this law. You can't even be thought to say these things. And so you're going to be extra, extra careful and stay way back behind the boundary.
Right.
And that chills free speech. That is the classic legal definition of chilling free speech, is staying away from the boundary. Well, to conclude, I'd love to give people an opportunity to get in touch with your organization and with you if they want to talk further, especially if they're in this field and have questions.
Thank you. ACHHS is our organization, so www.achhs.org. And there you can find our set of 9 core beliefs. It's very basic. It's God, the Trinity, human creation, marriage, human dignity, value, all of that. And so that's in our core beliefs are in there. How to join as a member is in there. If you're in social work, counseling, psychology, chaplaincy, healthcare fields, whether you're a physician, psychiatrist, or whether you work as a nurse, all of that. We're a broad umbrella, but we try to support all the professionals that are in the health and human services. And so please feel free to read through our website and join us if that describes you. You want support for being faithful to your Christian faith, and that's also Orthodox, Catholic. We're just kind of non-denominational here. Um, and we have a lot of resources. We have prayer support. We have online fellowship, professional networking. We do interdisciplinary education through our monthly webinars as well as through our annual conferences. We could use donations too because we keep our membership fees very low for this purpose. But
Oh, that's
yeah, and you can
we have a
reach.
conference coming up. What's the date of the conference?
Yes, our conference this year, fifth annual conference, is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, October 23rd to 25th. So if you're in the area or if you want to just fly in and meet some amazing fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who want to do ethical work, serve people, and learn from each other, be professionals, then please join us. We will be hosting our fifth annual conference. Our theme is we're pursuing life, liberty, and holiness. So, holiness because of our Christian identity. We want to do it right. We don't want to be the bad guys, the oppressors, the uncaring folks. We want to care for folks. And we want to also do it humbly, understanding that we need help too. If you want to get a hold of me, my email is kparker@achhs.org.
Well, Kim, thank you. This is all great to know, and we wish you well in this. And it just strikes me that, your organization is not about theology; it's about anthropology. It's about your understanding of what people are, what humanity is, what the good life is, and there are lots of ways to see that big issue. And your viewpoint should be welcome in the helping professions. So thanks for coming on. And I want to thank our producer, Caleb Broker, and invite you to come back to Conversation Balloons next time. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.